if you have the balding gene, it's easy to assume, it's easy to believe that men who don't have it, that their lives are easier. It's easy to assume that if you have the balding gene, then your whole life would just be smooth and everything would come together if only you had hair. That hair loss is the thing that's holding you back, that's preventing you from getting where you need to be in life. It's easy to assume that. But what's funny is that's simply not true. It's not true. I have talked to so many men throughout my life that have had virtually no hair loss in their 40s, 50s, 60s. And what I've learned from them, there's a common theme in all of their lives, that it's true. They've had one less problem than a lot of us have had. That one less problem is having to ever worry about losing their hair. That's true. They don't have the same problem. But they still have some kind of problem. They do. You know, I know a guy who's pushing 60, zero hair loss. I mean, sure, it's gray, but hey, who cares if you have gray hair? You just dye it, right? If it means that much to you. I know a guy pushing 60. And on the outside, it would appear that, yeah, his life, he's got a good career, been married for several decades now, has 2 grown sons. But this man has suffered from depression his whole life, like serious depression, like been to the hospital, like in bed in hospital over his depression. And as I've made the other video, I believe that depression is not simply something that just happens. Oh, you know what? It's hereditary. You got a chemical imbalance. That's just how it is. Take this medicine, be cured. No. You know, I made a video showing that article in the Huffington Post, and it talked about the main thing that people have in common with that they suffer from depression. What actually causes it is childhood trauma that they never got over, that they never talked out and figured out and had what's called a release of shame. Okay, if you haven't checked out that video I made, check it out. I think it's called like hair loss, depression, childhood trauma. If you search that, you'll find the video. But anyway, so there's a guy now, pushing 60, zero hair loss, great career, good marriage, 2 fine young sons, turned out just great. But I also know that he's been in the hospital for severe depression at least once, and he's struggled with it his whole life. Thing about him is, when he was young, I think it was around 10 years old, his father walked out on the family, disowned him. It's just like that song by Everclear, Father of Mine, you know, how he started out his life having a present father who, you know, spent time with them and got to know them and then just left. So there's one story. What if you made it to age 60 and got to keep all your hair, but you had to deal with depression your whole life and knowing that your father disowned you? I know another guy also pushing 60, zero hair loss. And his story is this. I mean, he doesn't seem to really have any issues in life, but also, when you really think about it, he also, as he's pushing age 60, he's so socially awkward. How do I say this? Even though he wants to pursue relationships with women, there's no evidence he's ever done that in any capacity. So to imagine full head of hair, but so socially awkward you don't know how to even ask someone out on a date. I can think of every man pushing 40, 50, 60 that has zero hair loss. And I know them all well enough that I could share with you their stories and say, okay, yeah, no hair loss, but here's his deal, here's his deal, here's his deal. There's always some kind of issue that I wouldn't want. That if you told me, Nick, you have to deal with depression your whole life, but you'll never lose your hair. And also your relationship with your father will be very strange and he will disown you, but you get to keep your hair. I'd say, no thanks, I'll go bald. Or they'll say, you know what, Nick, you get to keep your hair, but you're gonna just remain single and celibate your whole life because you're gonna have such social issues that you won't really know how to carry on. I'll be like, nope, I'll go bald. Thank you very much. So I've given you 2 real life examples on 2 different men that I definitely know, and these are true stories. And I can make this video a lot longer by telling you several more examples of these men with perfect hair that are pushing 40, 50, or 60 and have no issues with hair loss. But then there's this other thing. You know what? I would gladly take hair loss. I say those of us who have to deal with it sooner than later, we have to work our way through issues that other men never will. And I think in the long run, it actually makes us stronger. It makes us more prepared for things sooner in life rather than later. It's easy to assume. It's easy to assume that those men who don't have hair loss, that they've got less problems than us. It's easy to assume that everything is made great in life because they have hair. But actually, here's another 90s song reference. Okay, so one of my favorite bands from the 90s, Oasis, they had a song called Some Might Say. And in this song, there's a line where he says, some might say, I don't believe in heaven, but go and tell that to a man who lives in hell. To me, it somehow reminds me of this, that as someone with the balding gene, we could say, man, look at him, look at him, look at him. They all have hair. I wish I could have hair like them. I wish I could have a full head of hair for as long as I can. That'd be great. I wish I could have that. That's what I want. That's what's making my life incomplete, is that I don't have that. But then you go to that man. You get to know that man. And you say to him, look at you. You have this perfect hair. I wish I could have what you have. And I promise you, if you got to know him, he'd laugh. And he'd say, no, you don't. He's like, I may have all my hair, but let me tell you about this. And then he goes on to tell you how nasty divorce and medical problems and all of his struggles. And you say, no, but at least you got your hair. And his response, well, good as hair when I've had to go through this and this and this. See, that's the other side of the story. The man who's had no hair loss or little hair loss and lived his whole life that way, he's had issues that are greater than hair loss. And most likely, he would gladly trade in all of his hair to not have those problems. Well, guess what? What if you are actually the winner in this story? What if you end up going bald in your 20s, 30s, or 40s? And that's you, and you have to deal with it. But what if you also don't have to deal with depression? What if you also have decent social skills enough to help you navigate through life and marry someone and not get divorced and things are okay and you go to college and you get an education and you move forward with your life? Yeah, you go bald, but you have things that the guy with the perfect head of hair never gets to have. And you can both look at each other and think, would we want to swap up? Would I want? No. It's better to be bald than all those things. Men with perfect head of hair don't have less problems than us. We know this. We've talked about it in a video where we've had many conversations about homeless men have some of the best hair. Even on Jerry Seinfeld's show, Riding in Comedians with Cars, they acknowledged it. They're driving. Ricky Gervais, he sees the guy. Look at that homeless guy. Isn't it funny how homeless men always have a perfect head of hair? A perfect head of hair doesn't solve our problems. We romanticize that it does.